Jack it up. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to every listener. I'm Pran and I will be your MC today. I would like to welcome everyone to the fifth ASE webinar series in the topic of the environmental opportunity in the post-COVID-19 world. This webinar is brought to you by ASEAN Sustainable Energy Week 2020 or ASE, the ASEAN's most comprehensive international exhibition and conference on renewable energy efficiency, environmental and electric vehicles technologies, which will be held on 23 to 26 September this year at Bitech, Bangkok, Thailand. So today's webinar is marked to be the first ASE webinar series that related to the topic of the environmental, low carbon, waste management, and climate change. This time we partner with the Embassy of Japan in Thailand to create the webinar content and invite the expert to be here with us today. So our speaker will be discussing about the chance to invest in the environmental sector after the pandemic. And also you will be hearing about the key global trends, what is happening now, what direction you need to do next in this business, including the case study and the latest technologies. I do sure that they are ready to share with you in a couple minutes after this. And before we start, I would like to thank you to today's sponsor for this webinar, Miura, the best partner of energy, water, and environment. I also would like to give everyone a quick notice that if you would like to ask a question to our speaker, please send your question to the Q&A box below, and I would suggest you to address our speaker name in the questions. In case of you have any technical or internet issue during the webinar, you may watch this webinar on our ASE Facebook page, ASEAN Sustainable Energy Week. So now let me pass this stage to our moderator for today, Mr. Suga Yoshinori, the first secretary of the Embassy of Japan in Thailand. He is now working for Japan-Thailand Environmental Cooperation and International Organization Matters. He has joined the Ministry of the Environment in 2006, and now he's also experienced various works for environment. So good afternoon, Mr. Suga. Yes, the stage is yours now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Khun Vanapan from Informal Markets. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Informal Markets, as well as the sponsor for this session, Miura, and also honorable speakers to accept and support today's webinar. I think environment and environmental business are no exception and impacted by the outbreak of COVID-19. So we definitely need to carefully look at this impact. At the same time, it is also important to keep in mind more persistent, fundamental, and general environmental trends and issues. It includes circular economy, climate mitigation and adaptation, and air pollution, for example, or more broadly, sustainability and sustainable development goals. In this viewpoint, strategies for recovery from the COVID-19, such as Build Back Better or green recovery, are now discussed intensively, while sustainable business is more and more mainstream and attracting investment and support in general. Let me take one case. Japanese government, in cooperation with Thai government and other partner countries, has been supporting low carbon technologies and products in the region through JCM, joint crediting mechanism. There are more than 30 projects in Thailand. This program is not targeting the COVID-19 recovery. However, obviously, private sector can use this regular program to support their sustainable business or transform their business more sustainable in or after the outbreak of COVID-19. My point is looking at both existing and emerging challenges and opportunities, how to realize a virtuous cycle of environmental protection and economic growth is very important. So today's webinar will look at and combine the COVID-19 issues and the key trends in the environmental business, such as plastics, circular economy, low carbon, and ESG, and by mixing them, try to consider environmental opportunities. So with this background, I would like to welcome 4 notable speakers. Okay, the first speaker is Dr. Oratai Pongku Tam. She's the Director of Project Department at Thailand Environment Institute, TEI. She also serves on the Secretariat of Thailand Business Council for Sustainable Development, TBCSD, which promotes private sector participation on sustainable development. She will talk about the impacts of the COVID-19 in the environmental sector, as well as opportunities in Thailand. The second speaker is Professor Takamura Yukari. She's a professor in the Institute for Future Initiatives, the University of Tokyo. Her research focus is legal and governance issues surrounding environmental agreements. She also serves as a member of the Science Council, the Central Environmental Council, and Procurement Price Calculation Committee for Feed-in Tariff Scheme for Renewable Energy, expert meeting for the long-term strategy for decarbonization, and other governmental advisory bodies in Japan. She will talk about the global trend and Japanese experiences of investment and finance related to ESG investing and climate change. The third speaker is Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon. He's a regional coordinator for resource efficiency in Asia Pacific office of UNEP. He's supporting resource efficiency, sustainable consumption and production, green economy, green financing, sustainable public procurement, sustainable tourism, sustainable industries, and various areas for Asia and the Pacific. He will talk about ongoing relevant projects such as online dialogue on integrated waste management during COVID-19 and other important issues. The fourth speaker is Nachi Katemanoron. He's a sales manager of Miura, which supplies with boilers, water treatment equipment, food equipment, medical equipment, and environmental equipment. Miura also has the experience on the feasibility study on high efficiency one-through boiler and online maintenance system supported by NEDO, the New Energy and Technology Development Organization in Japan. He will talk about boilers management and maintenance and its importance for energy efficiency and environment, as well as IoT in the boiler operation. Thank you very much, speakers, for your participation today. I'm very pleased to share this exciting and wonderful moment with audience. So now I would like to invite the first speaker, Dr. Oratai Pongku Tam. Her presentation title is Impacts of COVID-19 on Thai Environmental Sector and Post-COVID-19 Policies. So Dr. Oratai, hand over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll share my screen here. All right. So my talk today will cover the introduction of my institute. I will just spend a couple minutes on here to introduce TEI, Thailand Environment Institute, and then I will share with you the information on the COVID-19 on environment, particularly in Thailand and also forward. So TEI is a non-profit, non-governmental organization. We work on the environmental and sustainable development issues, including natural resources and environment, climate change, sustainable consumption and production, and also emerging issues such as air pollution and plastic waste pollution. TEI has been ranked as among the world top think tanks for 8 consecutive years by the University of Pennsylvania. And then we are serve as a secretariat for Thailand Business Council for Sustainable Development, or TBCSD, which is a CEO-led organizations of about 40 companies. Our company's members are down here. And TBCSD has been working in order to tackle the national emerging environmental issues such as climate change, plastic waste management, and air pollution as well. In addition, TEI is the chairman and the secretariat of the PPP Plastic Thailand Public-Private Partnership for Plastic and Waste Management. This PPP Plastic was initiated in order to support Thailand plastic waste management roadmap implementation. We aim to circulate 100% of the target plastic waste into the production stream through chemical recycle or mechanical recycles, and including energy recovery by 2027. We also have over 40 companies, government sectors, and also private sector as the member of TBCSD to drive this agenda. So that is our background. And for the impact of COVID-19 on the environment, we have seen all of this photo on the spread of the coronavirus throughout the world, and also so people in the world has been impacted. As of yesterday, over 20 million people is already impacted. And if you see the global trend here with the graph, it's still steep curve of increasing of these infected coronavirus in the world picture. For Thailand, we have the first infection around mid-January recorded. And since then, the government has been implementing several of the measures to contain the COVID-19 and also prevent the spread of the outbreak. So mid-March, the government has announced the postpone of Songkran Festival, which is the biggest national festival, is the traditional New Year's in our country. And later on, the government also announced the closure of high-risk area. And around on the 26th of March, when the COVID confirmed cases in Thailand exceeds 1,000 cases, the government announced the emergency decree, following by nationwide curfew and also suspension of incoming flights to the country. So with the measures and cooperation from people in the country and all the sectors, we are able to keep the curve flattened and contain the COVID cases, new cases to less than 10 cases until today. So, and what is the environmental impact from that? So several of the reported has been reported that COVID-19 is help with reduce the traffic congestions and also reduce air pollution. This photo is a picture of Bangkok traffic as usual business during rush hours. And this is what happened when Bangkok was locked down due to COVID-19. The roads is pretty much empty. And of course, without emission from the engine, the air quality is better and the emission is lower. I do have this global statistic on air carbon emission, which many of you might have already seen. So there is a calculation and projection of the drop in carbon emission due to COVID global pandemic. It is estimated that the carbon drop emission is about 2,500 million tons, which is much larger than the drop during the end of World War II and the previous global recessions. That is quite high amount of carbon emission dropped. Also for wildlife, COVID-19 has actually been reported that it has been help with the wildlife recovery and habitat recovery. So the picture on this site is the national park, one of the famous national park, Khao Yai. national park in Thailand during the usual holidays. So it's always packed with traffic and people at the campground. However, during the lockdown in March and April, we found people spotted this sun bear on the road and also herds of elephants near the campground. On the marine habitat, it also has been closed down. This is a beach, Patong Beach in Phuket, during the high season, and also the picture below is during the beach closed down. So in Phuket and other coastal provinces of Thailand, we have seen a parade of wildlife. We would say that, you know, coming out, showing themselves to the people during the peaceful time for the environment. So this photo is photo of dugong. It's more than 20 dugongs, like in one time. This is just a little boat, if you can out in Mugat Lipong. So we also seen the ban of wildlife in many countries. I have two examples from Vietnam, bans of wildlife trade, and also from China, because it has been reported as it's linked to the coronavirus. And this sector is also important. During the COVID-19, in many countries, and particularly in Thailand, we found that food delivery expanded over 100% during the lockdown. So if you can see here that we have to acknowledge that plastic packages has been saved our food, you know, keep our food safe and clean. However, after the uses, several of these plastic packages cannot be reused, so it has to be thrown away. This has resulted in the change of proportion of plastic waste in the solid waste or household waste. So we have found that the proportion of plastic waste has been increases, although the overall total waste has been decreases. In a couple big cities such as Phuket, it has been reported about over 10% of the plastic, of the solid waste has been decreased, and it's about 50% in Pattaya of solid waste it has been decreased. However, when you look at the composition of the waste, you see more of the plastic packaging in those. So this is a calculation, example of calculation on the minimum of the plastic waste pieces from food delivery. Let's assume that for one meal, a person would create about 5 pieces of plastic waste, you know, excluding those that can be recycled. And let's say that 100 people order food from 6 applications. We have more than 10 food delivery applications in Thailand, but let's just say it's for 6 applications. So with this number, we can calculate more than 1 million pieces of plastic waste generated by food ordering. So this has to be the issue that we will need to discuss forward, how to tackle this. And of course, hazardous waste has been increasing. So hazardous waste, even though it's from food packages or recycled plastic, if it's used at the state quarantine, it cannot be recycled, because the waste, hazardous waste from state quarantine needs to be packed and then sent to the treatment facility. So this one calculation here from the state quarantine in Pattaya, it has been calculated that the state quarantine place generate about 3,000 kilograms of hazardous waste. In here it includes also packaging and plastic utensils, and also masses, which take about, you know, it's cost about 45,000 baht per day for waste management. And also in the household solid waste, we often find this contaminated waste together with other waste. Therefore, this can also increase the risk of the garbage collectors. In Thailand, during the COVID-19, we have the advocacy to save the garbage collectors from being infected from the waste. So they say, we risk our life for you. Can you separate the waste for us? Because it's quite dangerous. You know, we don't know who have the virus. So it's now come to the question on if, like many people want to really know if COVID-19 has positive or negative impacts on the environment. I think even though we've seen many positive sides, but without, we all recognize that this positive impact on the environment during the COVID, including the reduction of pollution or even appearance of wildlife, are temporary. It's not a structural reversal. Right after the lockdown release, when people go back to the nature, when we commute in the city, we will see the increase of air pollution and then less wildlife. In addition, the traffic and wildlife situations, the positive sides that I present earlier can be found even pre-COVID time. This first photo on the road is the empty road of Bangkok road during long holiday. So we do see the low emission during long holiday. And these leatherback turtles, she laid eggs on the beach in Phang even pre-COVID time. So we see many of them coming up as well. And this is a photo of Buddha whale that's spotted pre-COVID time. So, and then wildlife, we also see them coming out even when people exist presence at the park. This is a Khao Yai National Park also. So we see the elephant coming out and interact with people or maybe harm people. And then, you know, even in the campground, we see the wildlife. With many people on the beach, the leatherback turtle was up there as well. This though, with a lot of people in the nature, this can also create the human and wildlife conflict as well. So if we cannot tell, you know, without structural and study and research, we cannot really choose the size of the impact, if it's positive or negative. However, we know that the COVID-19 offers opportunities for us to rethink, to link the recovery, to choose the way we would move forward with, to the sustainable way, you know, like build back better, like Mr. Chika just mentioned. So what do we do with the post-COVID policies? So we could learn from our policy and measure that we implement during the COVID-19, such as we know for sure that working from home could reduce traffic, reduce the emission, and also improve air quality. We know that closure of national park can also give habitat and wildlife time to rest and recover. And right after COVID, when the national parks start to reopen, the Department of Marine DMP National Park has just implemented the measure application that visitor has to pre-register and make reservation in advance. And they also limit number of visitors per day, which actually will help with the recovery of the park in the long run as well. And for food delivery app, this app is in Thai, but it said that for several of the food delivery, it has an option for the customer to choose not to receive the single-use plastic utensils. So that could help reduce unnecessary demand of the unnecessary use of the plastic materials. So for the post-COVID policies need to balance the economy, environment, and people. For Thailand, Thailand has been building people, pay attention to the balance between the three components and also try to build resilience for all sectors for the future disaster and the pandemic. Thailand roadmap has been stated clearly that this is a long-term roadmap for a 20-year strategy of Thailand, that the country wants to improve the quality of life based on green growth. So with COVID-19, it's emphasized that opportunities for green growth and sustainable business are larger, are important. It's build more resilience to the communities and to the economy. And it's also show the opportunities of the sustainable production and consumption which are necessary. It's also tell us that we have to be efficient on the pollution prevention and management. The renewable energies has always been needed for the society to be able to move forward sustainably. It's also, the COVID-19 also emphasized that sustainable management and uses of natural resources is crucial. Carrying capacity and resource restoration and conservation of natural resources are also critical. Ecotourism, if we want to promote tourism, it has to be environmental friendly ways. Governance and resources mobilization for natural resources are the key role as well. And for human rights and equality, we have to also include it in all of the development and natural resources management, because it's just important that humans has a good quality of life and have the good standard of living, and then we can develop economic and conserve the environment in parallel. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Oratai. I think you kindly share the very interesting experiences in Thailand. It may include positive sides and the negative sides of the impacts of the COVID-19. And maybe we have very similar experience even before the outbreak. And maybe there are some lessons in your presentations from Thai experience, and that can be helpful, maybe very helpful for other countries, including ASEAN countries. But maybe we can discuss more later, and maybe we should move on to the next speaker. So thank you very much, Dr. Oratai. So the next speaker is Professor Takamura Yukari. Her presentation title is Decarbonization and ESG Investing, Changing Business and Paris Agreement. So Takamura Sensei, hand over to you.
So thank you very much, Suga-san and other organizers for inviting me to this webinar. And also I like to thank the Informal Market to organize everything for this webinar. So I'd like to share my slide. I hope you can see. Just a minute. So also I'd like to add my voices to thank the sponsors for this webinar. The Mura kindly, generously sponsoring this webinar. Thank you very much for that. So my topic, I think that you can see my slide. My topic is the change in business and ESG investing. Especially, I like to focus on the business behavior change and the investor change, and in the context of climate change. But of course, I'm going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 in the last part. So I think you might all know that the Paris Agreement, the Paris Agreement defined a very clear long-term goal toward decarbonization. Article 2, described that the holding the increasing global average temperature well below 2 degrees, and also the pursuing effort to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level. This long-term goal is translated into the emission goal in Article 4.1, which is the decarbonization goal by the end of this century. But this goal is not so easy. We all know that almost all countries to the ratifying the Paris Agreement submitted its national target, but these targets collectively are not sufficient to achieve this long-term goal. But a very interesting phenomenon actually occurring globally, if I may. I think I put out, I cited 4 driving forces to accelerate climate action. Maybe we have never seen. But first, I think driving force, as I mentioned, that the Paris Agreement long-term goal, which is provide a long-term political or policy goal guidance, And also, this is a webinar, especially the sustainable energy issue, so that I think most of you, audience, know that the energy transition is now happening, especially in the power sector led by the renewable energy. Also, we see quite a dynamic innovation across sectors. Sectors mean that the energy and mobility, building and digitalization, but I think I skipped 2 points in my presentation. I'd like to focus on the last point, which is the behavior and the perception changes of the businesses and also the investors. But if you have any question about energy transition or the innovation, or say across sectors, I wish to respond to your question in the question and answer time. So what I say as the quite an interesting phenomenon is that the non-state actor is now moving toward I can say decarbonization by 2050. So this is one of the initiatives led by the government of China and also supported by the United Nations. This Climate Ambition Alliance just started last year, but we collect the more than 120 countries and the EU who they claim that they wish to achieve the zero emission or zero CO2 zero emission by 2050. But not only a country, but also the region and cities. I just cited some, the big ASEAN cities like Kuala Lumpur and Jakarta and Hanoi. But also you can see that around 1,000 businesses, including ASEAN companies, and also the university and investors commit themselves to take action toward decarbonization by 2050. I think this kind of quite dynamic, phenomenon is we can see in another initiative as well. Maybe you might know that this initiative, it is an initiative called Science-Based Target. This initiative actually, the request the company to take on the target consistent with the Paris long-term goal, then well below 2 degrees or 1.5 degree, below pre-industrial level. You can see that I put the URL at the bottom of the slide, but you can see that almost 1,000 global companies have already committed to have such target, and also almost 500 companies already set such target. You can see here that what kind of Japanese company committed themselves to take on this, the science-based target. Maybe you can see that maybe you might be familiar with the name, like Ion, retailing company and others, and also the Toyota and other, vehicle company as well. I just checked what kind of ASEAN company which committed themselves to taking on this science-based target. I think you can see that some of the leading company already take the similar actions. What I like to emphasize here is that when the company take on such science-based target, most of the country commit themselves to reducing Scope 3 emissions. This is a case of the Asahi Group Holdings. Maybe you might know with the beer and drinking or something like that. This Asahi Group Holdings, it set the target reaching zero absolute emission by 2050, which is consistent with the long-term target goal of the Paris Agreement. And also this Asahi Group Holdings, they set a target of the 2030. So Scope 1 and the Scope 2 emission, as you might know, that the emission directly emitted by company operation. And scope 3 emission means that the emission or throughout of the supply chain of this company. So the procurement of material until the disposal of waste, including the use of its product by consumers. So you can see that this Asahi Group Holdings then commit themselves to reducing the supply chain emission by 30% in 2030. Interestingly, this company take a quite an interesting supply chain management. You can see that they organize a workshop to study the policy of this company, and the supplier, how to say, board member of the supplier participate in this, workshop. And also this group, this company undertake the QA and the QC for suppliers and check the situation, evaluate the achievement, in terms of this, criteria or the guideline established by this company. So what I like to say is that one of the driver or motivation of the company to taken on such target has come from actually the downstream company and the supply chain. That means that the customers of companies. The similar situation happened with the renewable procurement. Maybe you might know that this initiative, it was I think launched by firstly the IKEA and the Swiss Re. This initiative, the company commits themselves to procure the 100% of power from renewable source. For instance, here that 37 Japanese company take such target. You can see that the increase in number of the company commit to such target over time. But this COVID-19 situation did not stop this situation. For instance, the Microsoft, they announced that the carbon target by 20, they wish to reduce more emission than they actually emit. So but the interesting point is that the two achieve this goal. The Microsoft, wish to reduce scope 3 emission. As I said, that emissions throughout the supply chain of Microsoft. The upstream company, and then they take on that the new procurement process and tool to enable and incentivize the Microsoft supplier of their scope 1, 2, 3, and third 3 emission. So that means that if you wish to be a customer or supplier for this company, you have to be requested to reduce your emission even throughout the supply chain of it, not only it's of your operation, but also throughout the supply chain of your company. The same thing happened with Apple. So Apple already committed to be 100 carbon neutral by 2030, but the Apple procured 100% renewable energy for its operation. But now they are, moving its entire supply chain to clean power. So they started already this program, Supplier Clean Energy Program, in October 2015. You already 71 manufacturing partners in 17 countries, including Japan, have committed to procuring 100% renewable energy for Apple production. It's quite a gigantic incentive, the driver too, for the company to introduce the renewable energy, which is a source of the low carbon. Another driver is, of course, as you might know, that is the financial institution and the investors. So as you know, that now the investors, financial institution request the company to disclose climate-related risk, ask a company to analyze climate-related risk, especially when the society move towards decarbonization, and also if the climate change impact will, become worse over time. So this kind of disclosure, I mean, information, the acquired through disclosure is, based on, it's become a basis for the investment, often called ESG investing, E as environment, and S and society, and the G as governance. But now this ESG investing, whether the main part is actually the focus on climate change. So if you look at the amount of ESG investing, actually it started with European investors, but now moved to the North America. And then, from around 2 years ago, I think this trend come to Japan. And if you compare this number, I mean, between 2016 and 2018, the amount of the ESG investing actually 5 times. So it's really a big trend of the investors investing. So the one of the investors action is that the engagement. They decided the quite big emitter. Especially they selected 100 focus company and additionally 61 company. And they try to aggressively engage these companies toward low or carbon, action. For instance, you can see that the Japanese company is now in the list. I mean, there are 10 companies. You can see it's quite a global company that you might aware of this name. So this, investors' request is really, become getting strong. And also, as I said, the supplier request is also getting strong. This comes from the Bloomberg NEF data, but if you look at, if you have, your country have a difficulty in procuring the renewable energy, you might face in risk of losing your business opportunity. Japan is actually the second, might be loser in after the United States. So that's how the energy system become more renewable friendly is quite important, not only for the climate action, but also the competitiveness of your country. So I think the trend of the COVID-19 is very clearly, presented by my previous speaker. But we have quite a difficulty situation in economy, but that also we see some, the improvement of, say, the environmental aspect. Yes, that's true. But as I agree with Dr. Owatai, previous speaker, that of course it's not a structural change, but then we need to some fundamental transformation to cope with climate change and other environmental issues. I agree with that. Maybe the most important impact on climate action, and is of course including the clean energy transition. We see a quite a good surge of the clean energy investment for 5 years. But under the situation of COVID-19, this actually impacted. I mean, the investment in energy sector declined. Although the clean energy investment are relatively resistant, but the amount of investment of clean energy declined. But all especially upstream investment on coal and oil and the gas, it has very much severely impacted. So that the share of clean energy investments slightly, raised. The similar situation happened with the EV. So we can see that the very interesting situation that the investment is unfortunately declining, but the share of the clean energy and the clean investment is slightly, improving. So the last point, I think, in my sense, based on my presentation, I think that is very important timing for the green recovery. As I said, that the internalization, the mainstreaming of climate-related consideration in business strategy and decision-making in occurring through the climate disclosure, and also the investors' evaluation, and also supply upstream, especially downstream supplier request. And we could say that the ESG issue, especially climate action, is not only environmental issue, but also this issue clearly impact corporate company value in light of your customer and also financial market. Please remind you that this kind of approach is now spread into other issues like plastic issue. For instance, Norwegian governmental pension fund started to integrate the consideration of marine plastic issue into the evaluation for the investing companies. And also just the last month, the United Nations launched that task force on nature-related financial disclosure, so that's not expanded this trend to the nature conservation as well. So as the Dr. Oraptai mentioned, that the society wished to be more green, but investment for doing so is declining. So I think the most important point, one of the most important point is that how to accelerate private investment, especially in the context of climate action and clean energy. Of course, the private sector has more money than public sector. So, but still the government have a critical role to indicate the long-term policy guidance, like a long-term decarbonization goal and the clean energy introduction goal. And also government should take measure to facilitate investment and to make arrangement for the removing investment barriers. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Takamura Sensei. I think according to the recent article of Bangkok Post, Thailand offers 30 billion baht of green bonds to investors to help finance coronavirus support measures. So I think such trends are also seen in this region. And maybe some of the audience may feel that these trends or these things are happening only in Japan or Western countries. But I think your presentation indicated that now the company started looking at the supply chain as well. And I think ASEAN is important as a supply chain. And many companies maybe need to be aware about investment and the disclosure movements. Okay, thank you very much. So we can discuss later more. And then now let us move on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Dr. Mushtaq Ahmed Memon, and the title is Integrated Waste Management During COVID-19 and Build Back Better. And there is a question on the relationship between the waste and greenhouse gas emission. Maybe his presentation will cover that issue as well. So Mushtaq, hand over to you.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Suga-san. So let me start my presentation. And I hope all of you can see my presentation. Okay, so now today, as Suga-san mentioned, that we are looking on the integrated waste management for COVID-19 and also linkages with the Build Back Better, including on the greenhouse gas emissions. As we see that during this pandemic, what has happened to the waste generation? So the two waste streams has come out very visible, quite different from the normal times. So one is the medical waste. Now, as we see that in many countries, the medical waste has increased, and that medical waste does not only mean from the hospitals, but also generated from the homes, households, quarantine places, and so on. So that's a huge increase in the medical waste. And also we already know during normal times also that most of the countries, they do not have a complete management systems for treating the medical waste in line with the environmental standards and so on. So there's a lack of capacity, and that means this increase in the medical waste has more severe pressure on the current capacities for managing the medical waste in many countries. Then also we look other stream, that's the plastics basically. Now, either in the plastics in the part of the medical waste itself, like a personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, even tubes and so on, or the plastics with the increased home delivery, food, and as Dr. Orathai was also showing us that a lot of packaging waste and so on, then e-commerce has increased and so forth, and also electronics like gadgets, ICTs has increased during the lockdown, and the plastics related with that one also major challenge with that one. So this plastic is a very, very important aspect for the pandemic. Now, let's go a little bit in the details that when we are talking about the medical waste, then on the one hand, as I mentioned that this personal protective equipment has increased, and we have seen a lot of photos now that all the masks, gloves, and so on, or even in the marine environment. So this plastic pollution has been severely increased during the pandemic. And one part is from the medical waste. And number two, the medical waste itself, like medication, syringes, and so on, because of a lot of quarantine places and so forth. So that's where we have seen that a lot of medical waste also came in place. Now, when we are looking on some of the good examples, as we saw in Wuhan, China, where the first COVID challenge was there. So what they did, that they started building the waste management capacity for the medical waste in Wuhan immediately when they start treating or isolating the COVID positive patients. And that's where the important point is that waste management should be taken as the part of the COVID-19 management strategy. It should not be taken as a separate. Then we look on the plastics now, that we have seen that plastic pollution has increased, not only because of the increase in the plastics as we are talking, but also the decrease in the collection of the waste due to the fear for the infections, and also the broken down of the recycling systems during lockdowns, also broken down of the supply chains and so on. So the huge impact is quite severe. And as we see that even in Thailand, like where the plastic, this ban or charging started in the convenience shops and so on. So many countries, there before the COVID, there was a huge pressure on the plastics in the wake of the new international or global discussions, including on the United Nations Environment Assembly discussions on the marine litter and so on. So many countries before the COVID started working towards the managing the plastics or single-use plastics, or to reduce the plastic pollution in the marine environment, on the land, in the rivers, and also the air and so on. But unfortunately, during the COVID, all those countries in one way or other has like a slow down those efforts, because there's a lot of questions were raised on the safety and so on for the pack to have increased packaging. And this plastic has already affected a lot our environments. And as this Thailand Environment Institute, as Dr. Orthai also mentioned, there's a huge increase in the plastics and packaging during the pandemic. And same studies from Singapore and other countries are there. And we are also trying to establish quite more intensive or science-based studies with Asian Institute of Technology more recently. And then also looking on the e-commerce, that e-commerce has increased again enormously because of the lockdown and so on. And with the e-commerce, the products we usually buy from shops or the supermarkets is not having that much of packaging as we see the packaging when we order online. So it's a visible difference there. And that's where like many international bodies or the agencies are really creating a major alert that this COVID-19 has made us more vulnerable to the plastic pollution. Then coming to the solution side, how we improve the waste management during this COVID. Now, this is a disaster, one of the disaster situations. And when we have the look on the disaster waste management, where we have the prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery principles, so that we look into that. For example, during the earthquake situation, or during the landslides or tsunamis, those are the disasters. They happen and then they leave behind a lot of debris, but then the full immediate focus is to remove the debris, to provide the humanitarian support and so on. But then there are other type of disasters like flooding. And if we all remember in 2011, when there was a huge flooding in Bangkok or Thailand, and the water, we were submerged for 2 months. So then the situation is that, that on the one hand, people are still living there. So they need a waste management services. And on the other hand, because of the flooding, there was a deterioration of the equipment, the furnitures, and so on. So the disaster-related debris were also coming up. And the third problem was that because of the disaster, they need to have a boats instead of the vehicles, and they need to have a storage facilities uphill and so on. So this all preparedness was required for that. So similar situation is for the COVID now, that on the one hand, we need a special equipment or improved equipment, including the personal protective gear and so on for the waste collectors and so forth. Then we need a proper storage or different storage facilities to keep even the plastics and other for certain time of the day, like there before getting to the recycling and so forth. So this situation is more or less like when we have those principles for the prevention, preparedness, and response and recovery for flood is equal to the we can apply during the COVID situation. So the response is based on that. Now to that response, the United Nations Environment Program and our executive director, Ms. Inger Anderson, she launched the working with the environment to protect people, and there were 4 responses within that. And the first response was the medical and humanitarian emergency phase, where we have supporting on the medical waste, the plastics and all this there. Then the second was the transformational change for nature and people. Again, as we saw that a lot of challenges are coming from the illegal trade of wildlife and so on, with the linkages with this virus and so, but more important also the waste from those animals and so forth. The third one is investing to build back better. And again, we see that waste management is one of the key sectors which can help to build back better, even the SMEs and so on. For example, when we are talking about the tourism. Now, before the COVID, if we look on the tourism and waste, including the plastics, packaging, same food, is a huge amount. Now, if we are building back better the tourism, we can look for the tourism that will have a much lesser impact on the environment, for example, the waste. That means we need to look or work with the SMEs or to create new SMEs or the businesses which have a green products or green packaging or take back systems and so on. So if we are building it better, investing in the SMEs, we can look on the alternatives that we are better off than what was the situation before the COVID, suppose vis-a-vis the tourism. Same goes with the hotel industry, same can go with the e-commerce and so on. And then the fourth one is global environmental governance, including the multilateral environmental agreements. We have already a Minamata Convention, for example, for mercury, and then the Basel Convention, Stockholm for POPs and so on, and then United Nations Environment Assembly and so forth. So looking on this support system, how we are going to help the member states and the stakeholders. To that end, SDGs and the Paris Agreement for climate change, for example, they are the two major goals or objectives that we are supporting member states. To look on that, what SDGs we are going to cover, or what indicators within each SDG, as I already mentioned about the sustainable consumption and production like SDG 12, but then we are looking also on the marine environment or plastic pollution there, that's 14. Then also the greenhouse gases, climate action 13 and so on. So there's quite many SDGs related with the integrated waste management and so on. But then the challenging point is that in Asia Pacific, the middle income is huge, this group. And that's what was visible, that during the lockdowns and all this, there was still a lot of consumerism, home deliveries and so on. So that we have to take in view that how we are going to work with the middle income to raise the sustainable lifestyles where we can reduce their consumerism, which results into the huge amounts of the waste. And then for that reason, looking at the circular economy, that if we can have green supply chains and the supply chains as local as possible. So that was the target, that we can create the circular economy models for most of the products and services to reduce the leakages or mismanaged waste. And for that reason, if we look on the waste generation rates, we can see many countries has a very small waste generation. But on the other hand, when we're talking about the littering, many of those countries have a highest rates of the littering, because the finance is a challenge, because waste management is an expensive business. It requires capital, investments, technology, and so on. So that's why we have to look into the more detail that what type of the waste composition is there. And we have seen the increase in plastics. Now, how to manage the plastics through better technologies, either from the production side, either from the service side, either from the recyclability side, and either from the recovery side. So this is a very important assessment that every country has to do, and we are supporting on that. And for that reason, when we are looking on the different roles and responsibilities where we are providing the support, for example, the government public sector, they have to come out with the better regulatory frameworks or institutional setup between the central governments, the local governments, or different departments of the governments, as different countries has a different departments responsible for different types of waste and so on. And the tariff designing for public-private partnerships and subsidies and guarantees as well. Then on the private sector, because they have to bring the investments as well as the management efficiency in the waste management system. And that's where their financial share is very important. Their technical innovation for efficiency is important. Their manager role for efficiency is important. And the local knowledge for the green supply chains, the local supply chains, and then the backward and forward linkages to make these supply chains happen is important. And for the consumers, us, we have to understand how sustainable lifestyles are important for us to be healthy and happier, because we are affecting our own health if we create the pollution. And that's where the circular economy model is very important. So looking on these roles and responsibilities across the different interventions like financial, social, technical, environmental, and so on, we can create a different set of a full package or system approach for the circular economy. We can reverse the paradigm of waste management. That means we bring the waste reduction on the top and landfilling as the last option. So now looking on the reversing this paradigm or introducing the circular economy, what major challenges are there for integrated waste management? Obviously, the regulatory frameworks, there are quite many, but still there's a lot of policies on different waste streams and so on, and then also the implementation, and also the commitments to the MEAs, SDGs, and NDCs. How? Because waste management contributes a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions, as even from the landfills, there's a 5% of the GHGs going there. But if we look on the full circular economy models, is a 15 to 20%, 25% of GHGs can be reduced through circular economy. Then the institutional arrangements, as we already discussed, the different departments, coherence, the different levels of the government, from the central to the provincial to the city level, is very important. And the financing mechanisms, as also Professor Takamura was mentioning about a lot of finance, and even a lot of climate finance can get into the waste management based on this 15 to 20% reduction of GHGs through the proper circular economy models. We can look on that. But also, as I mentioned, the waste management is very expensive business. So polluter per principle should be on the top, and based on the direct taxes and so on. Then also bringing the extended producer responsibility, also a very, very important tool for the packaging and plastic waste, as many countries like Japan, they already introduced those EPR-based rules and regulations many years back for e-waste, for packaging waste and construction waste and so on. Then the business models, as we now know that instead of product, if we focus on the service, then inventory can be controlled. So there's less leakages in the environment when we sell the service rather than the packaging, and we can increase the reusability and recyclability efficiently. Then technologies and infrastructure as one of the prime areas, and we have seen that a lot of challenges because of financial and technical capacities, but the infrastructure is not yet in place fully in many countries. Informal sector, as we have seen during COVID, also situations that the worst hit or the victim is informal sector because of all the medical waste mixed with there, all the plastics, infectious waste and so on. So we have to really work with the users or consumers or the waste generators to improve the situation of the waste, that informal sector also have a better health and also the better access to their source of income. Then behavioral changes is the very, very important, how we do the source segregation, how we properly dispose everything separately and so on, how we reduce the waste and how we are willing to pay for our waste as a polluter per principle and so on, how we promote the recyclable goods, upscaling and so on. So that's very important. To help achieving all this, UNEP has done over the years, including the UNEP ITC based in Osaka with the support from the government of Japan and also from any other countries. We have done almost all the areas or streams of waste management, starting from the data collection to the assessment of the gaps to the target setting and developing different intervention as a comprehensive package, which are available online. So last, I want to leave a few questions for you, that when we are talking about the build better, how we can really build better. First is that how we exchange the knowledge, because many countries have done or doing quite good things in various areas. So this South-South cooperation and South-North cooperation is very, very important as the center to help to achieve the major policy support, investments, and also bringing the full circular economy model, not just focusing downstream or only upstream interventions. And then also the key areas of waste management system, because whenever we talk about the waste, everyone has a different ideas, because for us, waste is management is a waste collection. Then because we only see is taken away from our home, that's done. But how the real whole management system is in place, that is very important. And as I say, greenhouse gas is also very much related with the waste management system. So we have to be very, very careful in designing the full system to address all the environmental or negative impacts of even the waste management system itself. So at this note, I just want to close for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Maybe we are a little bit behind the schedule, so maybe we can discuss further at the end of the session. Thank you very much. So, so now let's move on to the next speaker. The last speaker is Mr. Nati Katemanorom. His presentation title is The Paradigm Shift of Real-Time Boiler Maintenance System for Zero Breakdown and Energy Management of Low Carbon Emission Steam System. So, could Nati, hand over to you.
Hello. Hi, good everyone. I'm Nati from Mula Industry Boiler Thailand. Thank you for giving my time today for introduce about the paradigm shift of real-time boiler management for slow breakdown energy and low carbon steam system. Beginning at my own point, I would like to presentation about the topic that I would like to say today. The first topic about our Mula company business discipline, and next about the Mula boiler in the global impact, and next Mula boiler in the Thailand market, and also how the company create the product to reduce emission, and also how the company can create the system for the maintenance system for online maintenance to maintain efficiency of boiler. The most important thing for let's pass in 60 years before, the Mula have the mission for the company to discipline to the company to create the value of the product that the best partner of energy, water, and environment. So the 60 years past, we also run business by this principle. That nowadays, we also have the boiler in the global around 143,000 units. In the Asia, 145,000 units, and North America about 2,500.
Mr. Nativ,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt. I think your PowerPoint is not presenting because we are still seeing the first page.
Really?
Yes.
You change?
Not yet.
Yes.
I would suggest you to stop sharing your screen and do it once again. I'm sorry, everyone, to interrupt. Okay, it's changed now. Okay,
Change
please
now?
continue.
Okay. For this fundamental of company business, so now currently we also have the boiler in the global more than 143,000 units. The impact for the global emission around 180 million cubic tons to reduce CO2 every year, and allow 420 million for economy saving out of the world. For Thailand business, for Thailand market, not so big market for the boiler unit, but we researched that the number of the fuel in boiler more than percentage is coal. So we have feasibility study that if on the boiler or the coal system boiler change to the LNG, how many percentage of the impact in emission? The data show that allow 44% of the emission, allow 979 tons of CO2 will reduce. And next, about the product company. We also have the QA for the boiler microcomputer control that can able control the emission every time of the operating boiler. The boiler panel can show the scale monitor, can show the efficiency of boiler, and can show the exhaust gas boiler. The on-off thing can be impact to the emission. And for important thing for the boiler emission is the low NOx design. We also design the boiler that low NOx design by 55 parts per million of the disease design, and also it also have high efficiency. We researched that all of the customer, they also not use boiler in the high load of boiler, but sometimes the low load of boiler. In that time, the low load boiler also need and loss for consumption of energy. So we create this protection limit boiler. And the previous product, we also have the many series of the product. We learned by research that number of the CO2 will be related with the NOx. So we design for the low temperature of combustion, and it make for the low NOx as well. This is a product of the company, but not only the product. We also create a system for the maintenance services. As you might know that the non-efficiency of the maintenance service can be cause of the emission high, and so can be cause of expense very high. For example, if the temperature of the fuel gas boiler increase 20%, it will cause of efficiency of boiler reduce 1%. That means effect in the annual cost that customer will pay, around 1 million baht per year. So that by our concept is designed for the on-time, real-time, 24-hour for maintenance system. The maintenance system we also introduced in the market in Japan more than 29 years before. By monitoring currently 65,000 units in Japan. The important thing of the system, we can see by remote of function of boiler. Which function is failure? Which function is not good? Which function to have to repair part? So we no need to visit on site. We can troubleshoot quickly. In the same currently other market in the COVID. We also no need to visit the customer factory, but we can know what is the failure of the boiler. We can suggest to customer what should they do for improve efficiency to reduce fuel cost and also to reduce the emission as well. We implement about not only for online payment to outside sales service, but we also implement boiler efficiency guarantee concept to our customer also. That those I present for good product, good services, we can guarantee boiler efficiency in terms of the customer use. not only for preventive boiler, but we also can do wide water analysis and also can see how the boiler going on now. Our product is not in the boiler, but also in the system, in steam system, boiler, water softener, chemical feed pump, and also including the boiler. We can also input the data on it, and we can service our online system. Some customers that need to advise, we can do for the web camera service. Customers will wear the camera, will wear the glasses, and by the customer eye, customer can see what the part of the boiler should be changed. It because in factory in Japan, some factory have no the engineering for the gentleman guy, but only for the lady for the offices. We also use this concept for implement in the COVID system now also as well. For summary, the product is for high efficiency, eco-friendly, high level of the safety stand in Japan. And now we also in globally 150 million metric tons for annual for CO can reduce. In Thailand, the data show that if boiler in Thailand switch for conventional boiler by coal boiler to LNG, the study show that the emission can reduce 44% of the CO2. It means one of 955 tons per year. So we are a company that thinking about the environmental improvement and hope that our concept of the product and service can be more do the Thai clear slide scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunaki. I just have a quick question for you. I think remote services sound very much fitting with the response to the COVID-19. How do you think, any reactions have you get in the market, from the market? If you can answer.
Can say it again?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, such service, because the issue of the COVID-19 is the contacts of the physical contact of the humans. So, and also there is a big barrier for people to come from other countries to another countries.
I got your question again.
So I mean, I think IoT, the use of IoT and the remote service is very good.
Yeah.
Should be supported in the response against the COVID-19.
Oh,
so,
yes.
So have you got any response or reactions from the market, your customers?
Actually, current market in Thailand not respond for the IoT boiler now yet, because that it have limited for access the system as well. The Thai market customer think about the initial cost firstly, but they don't think about the long run period of the equipment. So this is one of the limited reason for the customer to access this product.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we are already in the Q&A session, but as you know, notice the time is quite limited. So please accept I cannot ask all of the questions. But firstly, I think I should ask Mushtaq. I think some some people said that possibly that everything will come back. And how do you think? I think even before the outbreak, some of the countries in the regions were suffering or struggling for the basic waste management. And now that we have the outbreak of the COVID-19 and there are more burden, for example, in the waste management for the medical waste, for example, that's quite challenging. And we will just come back to normal, or how we can build back with for such things.
Thank you, Suga-san. Yeah, I was typing also back to Yamada Sensei, Noriko Yamada Sensei, but let me put your reply first. That as I mentioned, I gave an example of tourism, like if we are building back better the tourism sector, and one of the areas we can look into that before the COVID, the amount of the waste which is related with the tourism, whether it be the food waste, whether it be the plastics, packaging, and so on. So if we are looking on this opening up of the tourism sector again, and what interventions we can do to reduce that correlation of the tourism and waste that was before. Now, this brings the whole like SMEs and including the hotels and everything in perspective, that how we work with those actors to reduce that one. Because on the one hand, let's say the PET bottles for tourism. So how we work with the PET bottles industry, not only the PET bottle producers, but also the food industries drinks and all that, they use the PET bottles to pack the drinks, and how that recyclability. So suppose one company has increased the recyclability rate, but unless there's a proper take back system and recycling technology, it's not going to recycle, even if the recyclability is very high, the material wise. So I think this is a very good time to work with all those actors to come with the alternatives or improve take back systems or improve local supply chains. So I think we are in a very good opportune time to learn, make a proper correlations, what was happening before, it should not happen, and how it should not happen. We can come with the policies, technologies, financing mechanisms, and so on. Thank you.
So maybe that's a synergy, kind of synergy,
yeah.
Right? And it's possible to make the system more flexible or adaptive against the shock.
Yeah, and put local SMEs in place, because it's good to invest in the local SMEs, local jobs, green jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any good lessons or examples from Thai experience? Dr. Oratai, already you touched some examples like remote work, closure of national parks, and some utensil options for food deliveries. Do you have anything to add?
So yes, so for the example, so there are those options, and also I think it is important that to tackle these emerging pandemics, it needs the collaboration among all the sectors within the country and also with outside the country. And the knowledge, information dissemination is also very critical. People need to know what they need to do to be able to prevent and contain the disease. And for the future, to build back the better future, I think we need to keep the momentum of this, because our upside is our mind, I always say. Because after the pandemic, policymakers and even business and people will be back and focus on the development. If we do not advocate on the importance of build back the sustainable future, there might be lack of intentions on that. And I also think platform like this platform, the collaboration, exchange knowledge among different sectors is also important to advocate the policy and the public on the need that we need to sustain the momentum and also keep thinking about the green future.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with that. And actually, Thai experience is very interesting and yeah, very interesting. But unfortunately, today we have very quite limited time. Anyway, thank you very much. And Takamura Sensei, mainly we discussed about the waste management or circular economy. Is it also relevant to the trend of investment? I mean, the ESG or other types of investment. I think there is a question about the linkage between the waste management and the climate change. Of course, it's quite relevant, and particularly, I think in like ASEAN countries, we will see more development in the future, most probably. And many, some people point out that, for example, steel industry or cement industry are more, crucial for decarbonization. So, how do you think about that?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I missed what you said, but whether the focusing on waste, I think sometimes between the climate and waste, right?
Yes, and I think that's quite relevant from my point of view.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also, should be supported by the ESG. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's somehow the answer for the Tung from Fu from the I think. Thank you. I received the question from him. How does the waste help in GHG emission? I think the waste sector is relatively small compared to energy sectors, but some estimate indicate that if we continue to use the plastic consumption like this so far, I mean the plastic of the oil basis, in 2050, the 15% of global emission come from plastic. So that means that I think that if only we focus on the plastic issue, there's a very clear linkage between the plastic and the waste end issue and climate change. And ESG investing trend is very clear that, of course, we started with climate change, but now the interest of the investor come to the plastic waste and marine plastic issues. So I cited the Norwegian governmental pension fund, but maybe another example is that this year, Morgan Stanley showed that study that the, first top two concern or interest of the individual investors are the climate change and the plastic issue. They are equal rate, so that I think how to the accelerate action, the climate change and the plastic issue it's much with the environmental promotion, and at the same time the response to the ESG investing.
Okay, thank you very much. I think okay, so that's I think in the business sector side relatively, and maybe the government also has to do something from maybe Takamura Sensei or Mr. or Dr. Waratai. You have any idea about government supports for this trend, this direction? How to use the private money to move forward toward sustainability, particularly in this case during or after COVID-19. Do you have any comments or ideas?
Yeah. Okay. Briefly, what we are, suggesting or working with the United Nations country teams for the stimulus packages the governments are putting in, that one way is to leverage the private finance is providing the subsidies or the sort of risk hedging through the public finance. So because this is a sort of a new territory or a new where yet not the business models are tested and so on. So we are trying to see if the different business models can work, like a product as a service, as I mentioned, one business model, or shared economy, and or the SMEs getting to the green products, or SMEs going to the green processes. So how we can leverage the private finance, which is not easy to be used on the commercial rates, interest rates, by supporting through public finance. So this is one of the areas we are trying to see, to use the public finance to attract the private finance for NDCs and all this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything from Takamura Sensei?
Yeah, I agree with Menon-san because clearly we have a much larger amount of money on the side of the private sector, but how to catalyze this private sector? I think that we need first I mentioned that political or policy guidance from the long-term, from long-term perspective, but at the same time some kind of catalyzer from the public sector, as the Menon-san mentioned, that some kind of public support to kicking off the private investment. I think that's quite a good example. And I think I see quite a relevant question from the anonymous people, but I think at this moment, maybe short term, we cannot avoid some kind of increasing emission. But since we now wish to invest a lot of money for recovery, I think that we could change the course of direction. I mean, invest in the more greener infrastructure like energy and waste, or building, transport, even agriculture. I think that is a clever way. Maybe we have some short-term, increasing emission, but still we could definitely get the long-term drastic emission reduction. That's it.
Yeah, that could be, of course, an opportunity for environmental business sector. And any comments or reaction from, for example, Dr. Uratai?
Yes, I agree with both of my speakers. Yes, and a mechanism that is important is the catalyze, like Dr. Takamura just said. I have an example of this plastic waste management in Thailand. Thailand established the public-private partnership. So leader in the business sectors and the government decision maker come together, and they discuss about how Thailand would work on address this issue. So with the Thailand roadmap for plastic waste management, private sector has put inputs and also public sector to come up with reliable reality of the target and indicators. So with that, as that a framework, we work together, government and private sector and public sector, to achieve that roadmap. So right now, private sector also help mobilize funding within the country from the donation of private sector, and also from other, we writing proposal to get money from our international organization to Thailand to address plastic waste. So, with this collaboration is a mechanism that can be implemented elsewhere and on other topics, including the sustainable business on clean energy, green infrastructure, or green energy. So this can be applied, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Kunati, do you have anything to say? Maybe we are close to the end. So of course, related to this discussion or on the whole discussion. Sorry, maybe you are muted, so please unmute.
In point of the boiler market in Thailand, if the support for the government about the assessment about the reduced emission for the boiler by that, like the JCM for carbon credit, that may be for increase of the target of the and it also cause of the deal of the emergency in future also.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I think unfortunately, the time is up. I do not summarize the discussion, but there are lots of interesting discussion and presentations, and I think it's also very inspiring. So I hope that today's session was very beneficial for all the participants. And I'd like to say thank you very much again, all the speakers. Thank you very much. And now, so I would like to hand over to Kun Vanaparan.
Okay, so that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for all speakers. So we appreciate your time and your expertise on today's topic, as well as to everyone in the audience. We appreciate your attention and your participations. So if you wish to download the presentation by our speakers, this is also available on our website by this Friday. And also for the question which is not being answered live, we shall get back to our speaker and they will help to provide the answer. So this will be shown on our website as well. So before we end today, I would like to cordially invite everyone of you to join for the upcoming exhibitions. The event is the ASEAN Sustainable Energy Week 2020, which will be held on 23 to 26 September this year at Bangkok, Thailand. And you will meet our sponsors, for the Mimura Thailand will be there as well. So you can see the technologies from them. I believe that this one is another stage that you should not be missed. So please do not worry about the limitations for the traveling between countries. Due to the COVID situation, the organizer has prepared the virtual events for you to give you a chance to meet at the exhibitions and conference via online platform. So which is happening at the same time with the event. For more information and registrations, please visit the website of the ASEAN Sustainable Energy. Okay, so lastly, I would like to thank you once again for your time and I wish you have a great day. So goodbye and thank you to all speakers. สวัสดีค่ะ